Some real-life romances can inspire great stories, retellings, or fictional biographies, and then some real-life romances leave you wondering why we are writing about this. Welcome back to another video. I am here with another review, and that is going to be my review of Becoming Mrs. Lewis by Patty Callahan. I was sent an advance reader copy by Thomas Nelson Canada for a free and honest review. Becoming Mrs. Lewis is the story of Joy Davidman when she started writing letters and her blossoming friendship with C.S. Lewis, or Jack to his friends. C.S. Lewis and Joy Davidman eventually fell in love and got married, but it's their relationship building and their friendship and the story in between that the bulk of this book covers. Overall, I gave this book a 2-star rating. I was not impressed. Now, this is an adult Christian romance, so this is an adult fiction, which I typically don't read, and as I said in some of my previous videos, Christian romance isn't what I lean to, but if it's on a subject that interests me, like the life of C.S. Lewis and Joy Davidman, this would be something I would pick up because it's kind of out of the norm of the regular stream of Christian romances. As we're following Joy Davidman's growth in her faith and changes in her life, she starts writing letters to C.S. Lewis and they start becoming pen pals and friends, and eventually she does go and visit him and his brother Warnie in Oxford in England. She eventually divorces her husband Bill Gresham and then moves to London to start a new life for her children David and Douglas. The reason I gave a 2-star rating is that this book left me feeling very awkward. It was very awkward. It was also eye-opening of the real life kind of behind people that we esteem and public figures that we look up to. It also opened my eyes to some of Jack Lewis's beliefs and what he didn't believe and what he did believe, which kind of left me feeling a little less starstruck by him. Now, in the Christian literary world, we do esteem C.S. Lewis very highly for his Chronicles of Narnia, for his written works like The Great Divorce, Mere Christianity, The Screwtape Letters, and other books, and we kind of esteem him very high for those. I'm learning more and more as I read about C.S. Lewis's life that he was not a theologian. He says himself several times that he is not a theologian, that he is simply a layperson explaining faith the best that he can. And I'm learning more and more about what he believed in some of his theologies, which do not line up with the Bible and biblical theologies. That has me now thinking that with what I read from C.S. Lewis, I am taking with a grain of salt, and he was more a philosopher than a theologian. One of the main reasons I gave this book a 2-star rating is, if you can see my tabs, other than I think 2, which were very strong faith points of this book, this was all sexual content. Some of the descriptions that this author used, there's some words that she used that, if not placed with other words, would be just normal descriptive words. But if you're placing certain bodily type words in with these words, they come off as very sexualized. And that's the way that the author wrote. We're also reading into Joy's lifestyle and some of the things that she struggled with. She was very much someone who looked for love and acceptance of men and just the abuse her husband put her through. There's mention of her husband right before their divorce when he claimed he was in love with her cousin, of wanting to do a threesome with her and her cousin. And I didn't feel like that was necessary. There was enough in there to give me the feeling that her husband, Bill Gresham, was just a man in need of a lot of correction and help and had a lot of issues. I got a lot of that from that situation without needing those details. Also, there was a lot of idolization on Joy's part of Jack Lewis, and it just seemed like she had a mental and emotional affair while she was still married to Bill Gresham, and she was still trying to fix that marriage, but she had esteemed Jack Lewis so high in her head mentally and emotionally that she was pretty much having an emotional affair at the time her husband was having physical affairs. There's a lot of mention of affairs. Joy slept around even after her conversion. There's just thoughts of her wishing Jack was more to her and that he wasn't so stuck in his ways, and that they could move from philia love to eros love, and just kind of thoughts of her saying, you know, I have him intellectually and as a friend, but I don't have him in my bed. There was just a lot of stuff like that in there that made it awkward to be reading this because these are real people. Real people that existed, and it's just for when it's fictional people, it's just not as awkward because they're fictional, they're not real, they didn't exist. But when you're reading about someone saying to take me up to your room and make love to me and you're real people, it just made it really awkward. Especially when it's somebody who's highly esteemed in the public eye. So those were some of my issues with the book, and like I said, it also opened my eyes to people that we esteem, we look up to. I'm not saying Jack and Joy were terrible people at all. They were sinners just like everybody. They are worthy of grace and God's love, and they asked for forgiveness, and they worked through their issues. But it's just very humbling to look at people that we esteem and realize that they had human issues just like the rest of us. Quite honestly, I don't see why there needed to be a fictional book written about Jack and Joy. I would have preferred to maybe read this in a non-fiction setting and like just a factual list of their life and their relationship rather than a non-fiction, because you're building the emotion, you're filling in things fictional where you don't know exactly what went on. So it just didn't need to be written as a fictional romance. Even Jack was not perfect in the relationship. He just wanted to keep Joy around for the companionship and what he needed her in his life for. So it was just interesting to see how their platonic love developed into real love. And toward the end, it was very sweet and endearing, and I believe they were truly and fully committed to each other and deeply in love, and that was very endearing. Jack Lewis also became a very good stepfather to both David and Douglas, and we know Douglas Gresham from the Focus on the Family productions, as well as working with the productions of the Narnia movies. So overall, I was not a huge fan of this book. It's not one I would recommend, especially for young adult. If it's adult fiction, so I just, it's adult fiction. It's got adult content in it. As I said, it's got a lot of sexual content in it. There's just a lot of sleeping around and mentions of things that I was just unimpressed with. And I found the faith elements were very glossed over because your brain will focus on the things that your brain is not supposed to focus on. So when you're reading the sexual content and just the sin that people are going through, I found that the focus of the faith and the forgiveness of what people were going through was kind of glossed over, and more of the negative was focused on than the positive. So as I said, it was a 2-star rating, very disappointing book for me. It was a struggle to get through it as well because I was just annoyed most of the time and I felt awkward reading this book. Just very, very awkward. This book does come out October 2nd, so it is available out in the world October 2nd if you guys want to still go ahead and pick this up. It's not one that I don't recommend, and I don't want to tell you what you guys should and shouldn't read. Some of you might still find this interesting. Some of you might not be bothered by what I was bothered by. So it's still an interesting book and eye-opening to see somebody in an average, normal light that we normally esteem really high. As I do in all my reviews, if you guys have any questions about any of the books that I mentioned, feel free to leave those questions down below, and I will answer them as best as I can. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!